Imagine building a company in your parents' garage, becoming famous, then getting escorted away from your own dream. Awkward? Historic? Both. This is Steve Jobs, the man who made simplicity look expensive and made executives fear beige plastic more than quarterly losses. But before the black turtleneck became a global uniform for people pretending meetings are spiritual, Steve was just restless energy. He was adopted, curious, difficult, and allergic to normal paths, the kind of kid teachers remember, then quietly recover from. Then came Woz, a gentle wizard of circuits, the rare friend who could turn Steve's what-if into blinking reality. In a garage, they built machines for hobbyists, because apparently billion-dollar empires begin where lawn equipment goes to be ignored. Woz loved elegant engineering. Steve loved the feeling people got when technology stopped acting like homework with electricity. Milo here, your tiny lamp narrator, watching humans discover computers and immediately wonder how to make them emotionally expensive. The first big lesson was simple: people do not buy circuits. They buy a story where circuits finally behave. Steve understood packaging before society understood unboxing videos, which is honestly impressive and slightly concerning for civilization. Success arrived fast, money arrived faster, and ego, as usual, showed up without being invited, wearing sunglasses indoors. Inside the company, Steve pushed for beauty, speed, control, and sometimes impossible deadlines, because apparently sleep was a competitor. He believed computers should be personal, not mysterious boxes that made ordinary people feel legally underqualified to press buttons. But passion can become a flamethrower. Great for clearing weeds, terrible when your coworkers are standing in the garden. To scale the company, Steve brought in a polished executive from the soda world. Because bubbles obviously prepare you for chaos. At first, Steve and the CEO looked like a perfect pair. One sold dreams, the other sold adult supervision. Then reality arrived, carrying spreadsheets, production delays, and the emotional warmth of a refrigerator in a tax office. Steve wanted a revolution in a box. The business side wanted a box people could actually afford without selling furniture. The board watched the conflict like people watching soup boil, except the soup owned stock options and strong opinions. By 30, Steve had helped build a giant company, then discovered giants sometimes sit on the person who fed them. He tried to win control. The CEO tried to keep control. The board chose order, because chaos rarely wears a tie. And just like that, the founder became the problem employee. Corporate life, where origin stories meet meeting minutes. The public saw a genius humbled. Steve felt something messier, betrayal, embarrassment, and probably several silent arguments with furniture. Here is the strange thing about losing status: once the crown falls off, your head can finally breathe. Steve later said getting fired freed him. At the time, freedom probably looked suspiciously like unemployment with better shoes. Most people, after humiliation, hide under blankets. Steve started another computer company, because blankets apparently lacked ambition. He called it NeXT, a name so confident it sounded like the universe had already scheduled his comeback. The machine was beautiful, expensive, and commercially difficult, the holy trinity of products praised by reviewers and avoided by wallets. At NeXT, Steve still chased perfection. Sadly, perfection is a terrible business partner. It never signs checks on time. The company struggled, but inside that struggle, something powerful was being built quietly: software, the invisible skeleton of the future. Meanwhile, Steve bought a tiny animation studio, which sounded random until history started laughing behind a curtain. Pixar was not just computers drawing cartoons. It was artists wrestling feelings into shapes children could understand. For a man obsessed with products, Pixar taught a dangerous lesson: technology matters less when the story is boring. At Apple, Steve had often demanded magic. At Pixar, he watched magic require drafts, patience, and suspicious amounts of coffee. He did not become gentle overnight. Billionaires rarely evolve like cartoon butterflies, they usually require lawyers and market pressure. But exile softened one certainty: maybe the product was not just the object. Maybe it was the emotional journey. While Steve rebuilt himself, his old company drifted, adding products like a confused buffet nobody had asked to attend. There were too many machines, too little clarity, and enough corporate strategy to make even a whiteboard feel tired. Then came the twist. Apple needed a modern operating system, and Steve's beautiful failure happened to be carrying one. The company that rejected Steve now wanted to buy the thing he built after rejection. Business irony, premium edition. Steve returned first as an advisor, which in Silicon Valley means temporarily harmless until the furniture rearranges itself. The old boardroom had changed, but the smell of panic remained. Companies in trouble develop a very specific perfume. This time, Steve did not just bring ideas. He brought scars, a studio's storytelling instincts, and software nobody could ignore. His first big move was not adding more. It was cutting, which terrified a company addicted to options. Fewer products meant clearer choices. Clear choices meant customers stopped needing a philosophy degree to buy a computer. He brought back focus, and focus is brutal. It looks inspiring from outside, but inside, projects disappear quietly. Society loves comeback stories because we can edit out the layoffs, the fear, and the unpaid emotional invoices. Still, the company needed saving, and Steve had a rare gift, making people believe tomorrow could be designed. The colorful new computer was not just a device. It was a personality sitting on a desk, refusing beige adulthood. People did not fully understand the specifications, but they understood the feeling. Finally, a computer that did not judge them. Then came music. Steve looked at cluttered digital songs and thought, what if pockets became tiny concert halls? The music player was simple, clean, and suspiciously good at making everyone's existing gadgets look like kitchen appliances. Notice the pattern. He rarely invented the category. He invaded confusion, removed friction, and sold the relief. That is why consumers called it innovation, while competitors called it unfair, and accountants called it finally, margin. But Steve's greatest trick was not selling devices. It was making devices feel like personal identity with batteries. Then the phone arrived, and suddenly every pocket became an office, camera, jukebox, map, diary, and anxiety machine. He presented it like a magician revealing a rabbit, except the rabbit would later destroy everyone's attention span. The world applauded. Then we all began touching glass rectangles in elevators, restaurants, beds, and family gatherings. Progress is complicated. This is the social satire part. We bought freedom, then paid monthly to be available every second. Steve did not create human impatience. He just gave it a beautiful interface and excellent battery marketing. Behind every clean keynote were messy factories of decisions, arguments, compromises, and teams whose names never became Halloween costumes. The myth says one genius changed everything. The truth is less tidy. Genius needs suppliers, engineers, designers, timing, and luck. Still, Steve's taste mattered. He had a ruthless eye for removing the awkward little frictions most companies politely decorate. He believed design was not how something looked, but how it worked, felt, and vanished from your way. That sounds noble. It also sounds like why your charger drawer now resembles a tiny plastic graveyard. The deeper twist is this: Steve did not simply return to Apple. Apple returned to the version of Steve exile created. Without NeXT, Apple might not get the software foundation. Without Pixar, Steve might not sharpen the story. The firing was supposed to erase him. Instead, it accidentally shipped him into the training montage. That is uncomfortable, because it suggests some disasters are not endings. They are expensive teachers with terrible manners. Of course, do not romanticize pain. Getting fired is not a productivity hack, despite what motivational posters whisper. The lesson is not suffer more. The lesson is learn faster when life rudely removes your favorite identity. Steve's identity had been founder, rebel, tastemaker. Exile asked a cruel question: who are you without applause? His answer was imperfect, sometimes harsh, but powerful: make something wonderful, then put it into the world. That phrase sounds beautiful until you realize wonderful things can still come from difficult people, which complicates the merch. So we should admire the work without pretending the worker was made of sunlight and ergonomic kindness. Steve's story is not a permission slip to be rude. It is a warning that taste without empathy gets expensive. And yet, taste with courage can rescue a drowning company, change habits, and make ordinary objects feel alive. That contradiction is why Steve Jobs remains fascinating: hero, headache, artist, salesman, student, tyrant, comeback machine. When people quote him, they often keep the shiny part and leave the bruises on the cutting room floor. But the bruises matter. They explain why the comeback had weight, not just lighting, applause, and a cleaner font. In the end, Steve's life was less about never falling and more about weaponizing the fall into direction. He connected dots backward, because forward they mostly look like random mistakes wearing fake confidence. The garage dot, the boardroom dot, the black cube dot, the animation dot, they only made sense later. That is both comforting and annoying, because nobody enjoys hearing that today's disaster may become tomorrow's origin story. Steve Jobs died in 2011, but the questions he left behind still buzz in our pockets every morning. What should technology remove from life? What should it protect? And why are we still arguing with autocorrect? His best products made machines feel human. His worst impulses remind us humans should not become machines. So the plot twist is not that Steve came back. It is that losing Apple helped build the Steve Apple needed. Maybe reinvention begins when life takes away your stage, and you finally hear the workshop again. And if a garage can become history, maybe your messy beginning deserves less shame and a better extension cord.